Man, look at this. Look at this place. Probably can't even see much. Today I just want to talk about Prometheus. Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus. I got up and read Aeschylus, Prometheus Bound, in the middle of the night a couple nights ago, because from being out here, I got all kinds of poison ivy on my arm, and it's like disintegrating my flesh, essentially, and it's extremely irritating. I woke up because it itches so bad, but for whatever reason, when your brain is like at a lesser functioning state, in between dream and waking, your thoughts are very odd, and they make weird connections. And I was thinking about that scene from that Prometheus movie where the Ridley Scott one, the alien one, where he drinks the cup and he disintegrates. I was like, man, that's like what's happening to me. What was that movie? Prometheus. And that got me thinking, Aeschylus, Prometheus Bound. I have yet to read this play. So I got up in the middle of the night and read Prometheus Bound. And it was an amazing play. Different from a lot of tragedies, because our hero has already made his tragic mistake, and the entire play is a stationary play. He's just strung up. He's crucified to a rock, which happens in the beginning. Hephaestus chains him. Hephaestus is actually quite sympathetic to Prometheus, because he feels bad about chaining up this Titan, which the Titans are sort of precursors to the Olympian gods. But Prometheus actually helps Zeus come to power and overthrow his father Kronos. But he ends up helping humanity because Zeus was going to destroy humanity, apparently. And at this point, humans are these sort of wandering animal-like beings that don't have the intellect whatsoever. And so Prometheus steals the fire from the gods and gives it to humanity. And that is not only actual physical, material, immaterial fire, but it represents the spark of intelligence and craft and techne, the Greek word techne, which is art and all kinds of craft. And he explains, because through this play, there's no action in it. It's just people talking to Prometheus while Prometheus is just sitting there being like, yeah, this is what I did, this is what's going on. And then sometimes he's sort of soliloquizing. There's soliloquy, he's talking to himself, and that type of thing. But he explains in there that, not only did I give him the fire, it was all craft, even mathematics, the most important mathematics. I taught them that. I taught them words, which gave them access to the muses, for poetry, obviously, and music. He taught them all this stuff, gave them this intelligence. So now humans are these intelligent beings. But he importantly also took away the knowledge. He took away some knowledge as well from humans, and that knowledge is the knowledge of one's fate, because this is a big concept in the play, is this fate. People are fated for things, and fate rules all. Fate rules what happens to Prometheus. People are telling Prometheus to just say you're sorry to Zeus, and maybe Zeus will let you go. But he says it doesn't matter. That's not how I'm going to get free. I have lots more suffering to go through before that happens. So Prometheus knows his fate. Prometheus is like, he has prescience, like Paul in Dune, in a way. He's able to see every path that the future holds, which you must think to Prometheus is almost a bit of a curse. So he gives to humanity hopeful illusions or hopeful diversions, in a way. So he takes away, he says that he stopped humans from pondering their doom. And for this he's punished by Zeus because he defies Zeus. And so Zeus's punishment is to chain him to this rock. And the various characters he talks to his mother, Gaia, who is the goddess or the god of the earth. So she's a terrestrial god versus the celestial gods. So Prometheus is born from her. He resides over material, earthly things in the Platonic sense, the Neoplatonic reading of that, which is why he gives humans these sort of intellect. But it's interesting because if Prometheus is giving humanity the ability to think and to do mathematics and language, to remember things, all this, he's giving them a way back to the one. Okay, that's not what Aeschylus is thinking about. That's just what I'm thinking about. So anyways, Prometheus is a sort of ambiguous character because he defies the gods and he's this sort of hateful, atheistic character, you could say. There's the famous line from this play where Prometheus says, "In short, I hate all gods," which will be used or parroted by Nietzsche in Beyond Good and Evil, or was it The Gay Science? I forget. But he says, "In short, I hate all gods." The god theism and believing in gods to Nietzsche is against his taste. It's against his taste in a way. It's just distasteful for him. It upsets his stomach to think about that. So Nietzsche is extremely Promethean, and so is Socrates actually. But here's the interesting part. It starts with Prometheus defying the gods and hating the gods. Like Milton's Satan, better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven, which you have to think Milton is definitely taking a lot of cues from Aeschylus with his Satan character. It starts with Prometheus, but then Aeschylus is sort of like, it's unclear what Aeschylus is trying to portray. Because on one hand, Prometheus is relatable. We like Prometheus because, well, he gave us human intellect. He made us what we are. He gave us techne. He gave us all these things, which even see, this is where it's complex, because even that, thinking about, we all overthink. We all have problems because of our intellect. That's why Pascal says we need diversions all the time, is because we have this problem. We can't retard max like we once used to. So in some ways, Prometheus is like the snake in the garden, or like the harlot for Enkidu, or the apple of, the sort of giving humanity knowledge of good and evil in defiance to the gods. So now humanity could be plagued with thoughts, but then they also have technology. We're able, with fire, to create all kinds of things. Think about in 2001, A Space Odyssey, the thing that sparks human evolution for in 2001 is when the monolith shows up, and it gives the monkeys this idea that they can use bones to kill other monkeys. All right, so that's gonna evolve and turn into greater and greater weapons of mass destruction, because all life is usurpation. And so we're gonna get stuff like firearms, and bigger mass destructive weapons. All right, I know you guys hate guns, but I have one out here, and I have the ability to use it, or I was fated to do it. I don't know. So that's a problem. It could be a problem. So it's unclear whether we're supposed to be thankful to Prometheus or whether we're supposed to side with Zeus in the Olympians against the Titan. So he's sort of ambiguous. You can go one way or the other. But ultimately, what he serves to do is to fight against tyranny. Because Zeus, the Olympian gods, are extreme. They're just like us. There's no real distinction. Zeus is constantly having extramarital affairs with mortals, which he hides from his wife Hera. And he's disobeying. Remember in the beginning of the Iliad, he's sort of trying to work with Athena behind Hera's back. He's doing things that are very seemingly human. But he just happens to be immortal. Now, he's the tyrant in this play. But he's not it's unclear who's the hero. Okay. I'm being very sporadic right now. Sorry. I have to try to herd my thoughts a little bit. But hero is just an ambiguous term. It has no connection to morality, I don't think. It does now because we get more moral plays, and there's morality baked into any kind of tragedy. But hero is a sort of exemplary character, or a demigod, if you look up the meaning of the word hero. But so that doesn't necessarily come along with any kind of moral stance of if he's a hero, he's a good guy, if he's a villain, he's a bad guy. But let's just say Zeus may or may not be the villain in this. You could look at him as a villain in the fact that he's a tyrant and he's chaining up Prometheus for helping out humanity, which we like him for doing that, being as we're now beyond the status of a mere beast. But then we have all kinds of troubles which come along with that, of course. You see some of Zeus's promiscuity in the character Io, which shows up, and she's this girl who's fated to produce a lineage through Zeus, which is eventually going to bear Hercules, or Heracles, which is going to free Prometheus in the end. So that's why they're talking. But Io is having these dreams that Zeus wants to have sex with her, and Zeus has to keep it a secret from Hera. So Io's father tells her to go out and wander in the fields with the beasts, and so she does. And then Zeus makes her grow these horns and kind of turns her into this sort of cow lady. And so, but she has to wander and wander. The reason he turns her into a cow is so that Hera's kind of an idiot. She'll look down and see, oh, it's just a cow, I guess. Which is why she's wandering with the beasts. I'm sure that there's more symbolic connections there. I just haven't discovered them yet. But she's fated to do this. None of this was her choice. And she gets told her fate, essentially, by Prometheus, because Prometheus knows everything. And when she hears her fate, she says, oh, I might as well just kill myself. This is so much struggle, and for something that I didn't even choose, I didn't even want in the first place for this to happen. But it just so happens that Zeus is the most powerful, and might makes right. Justice is the advantage of the stronger. You can see why Plato has a big problem with the Olympian gods that they're worshiping as Hellenic people. He says, are we really telling people that these are gods that we worship, and they happen to be just like us? The only reason why we're worshiping them is because they have the power? That's not just. That's not really what justice is, which is the start of the argument in the Republic. But in Book 3, he's going to lambast all the poets, and he's going to get really upset with Homer, go read the Republic, but book 3 is pretty much all about that. Understandably so. Zeus is a rapist. He's a tyrant. He really jacks people's lives up. Okay? But even he has a fate, as we find out from Prometheus. Let's see if I can find the passage where they discuss this. Give me just a minute here. Sorry, this is taking me a little while. Oh, I guess I could give you this real quick. Here's a really interesting line. Did you perhaps go further than you have told us? The chorus asks. And then Prometheus says, I caused the mortals to cease foreseeing doom. And the chorus asks, what cure did you provide them with against that sickness? And Prometheus says, I placed in them blind hopes. And the chorus says, that was a great gift you gave to men. And then Prometheus goes into explaining how he gave them the fire and intellect and all that. So here's where Zeus is explained to also be subject to fate, which you would think Zeus is all powerful. Surely he controls it. Well, it turns out no. Turns out Prometheus actually knows Zeus's fate, but he doesn't want to talk about it. So here's the line. The chorus asks, firstly Prometheus says, craft is far weaker than necessity. And the chorus asks, who then is the steersman of necessity? And Prometheus says, the triple-formed fates and the remembering furies, which you'll remember from the Eumenides, the Furies. The chorus asks, is Zeus weaker than these? And Prometheus says, yes, for he too cannot escape what is fated. And the chorus asks, what is fated for Zeus besides eternal sovereignty? And Prometheus says, inquire of this no further. Do not entreat me. Kind of interesting there. So even Zeus falls prey to fate. And fate is a big deal in a lot of these plays. Think about Sophocles and Oedipus. It's this character's fight against fate because he's fated to do this moral evil which he himself wants nothing to do with and tries to get away from it. But even through getting away from this moral evil which he's fated to do, he inadvertently falls prey to fate and has to be punished for it either way. Reminds you a little bit of Job, all right? The Christian version, in a lot of ways, you could think about Prometheus almost as being, because you got to think, Prometheus is fated for this to happen too. Now, it's unclear whether he has his fate and he just is like, well, I fully embody my fate, or if he just has no choice and he's just sort of robotically doing it. But he seems very, like he believes in what he's doing, but he's fated to suffer. This is, you could look at Prometheus as the Athenian distinction versus the Jerusalem distinction, the Jerusalem versus Athens. Athens, Prometheus, defiant against God. His fate is to push against the inevitable, to push against the power with his intellect, push against the gods, and he says, in short, I hate all gods. Or Job on the Jerusalem side, which he's fated to suffer unjustly from Yahweh, but he has to endure his fate. I've heard readings of Job where Job is actually sort of full of his own piety, and that's why God sort of punishes him. But either way, both are being sort of unjustly punished by a god. But the answer is different. The answer for Prometheus is to hate all gods and defy, and like Milton's Satan, better to serve in hell, or to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. Or Jerusalem, surrender, don't curse Yahweh, and remain faithful. But it brings up lots of interesting questions about fate. And who controls the fate? He says that there's the triad of fate. There's these three entities which control fate, which control how everything goes. And it makes me think about, obviously, predetermined, or determinism versus free will. And this is something that I'm never going to get over. I might just have different sort of answers to it at different times. I take the two extremes, and I'm trying to find a mean between the two, of total determinism and total free will, which I just don't think is possible, because nobody chooses half the things. I mean, I was thinking about this. With free will, you don't choose when you were born, where you were born, who your parents were, how much money you have, how much money your parents had, what language you speak, any of that. You don't choose any of it. I can't choose to fly away right now. So my choices are intrinsically limited. But yet we experience free will every day. I have the free will to do that. Look, this is Pavlov's gun. If you see it, it has to go off at some point, all right? Is that what it is? Pavlov's gun? Pavlov's dog? Whatever. Total free will versus total determinism. At what point do we start making choices? Because everybody, if you think back to your earliest memory, it's almost like a moment when your brain kind of like goes online, and your brain holds memories, and then from those memories you start to actually make decisions that are more than instinctual responses to stimuli, because you know what's happened in the past, which gives you another option to a scenario, possibly. But when do we start to get this faculty of free will? At what point in your development does this happen? It's kind of an interesting question. I don't know, but there has to be some sort of mean between total determinism and total free will. It can't, some things are just, you just don't have a choice. But if there's some sort of mean between the two, I'd like to know what it is. I think there's a line about that in GoldenEye. What was it? It's something about two options, like fate and luck or something like that. I lost the quote. It's okay. But sort of interesting. Oh, but I was going to bring up the idea of people being Promethean. The most readily available example would be somebody like Nietzsche. Nietzsche is very Promethean, obviously. Socrates is Promethean because he kicks against the Greek pantheon, but then he creates this idea of this one, of the one. He doesn't create it, but, Plato later on sort of develops this idea, and then that gets carried on through the Neoplatonic structure, Neoplatonic tradition. So you have this one, right? And then since Plato, since Socrates, we've always been thinking about this sort of monotheistic, all-powerful, immaterial, transcendent being. And then, so we've gotten away from the sort of lesser, rudimentary Olympian gods, which are sort of chaotic and they are unjust and they just happen to be more powerful than mortals. We move past that idea, we into this all-knowing, transcendent prime cause, and then Nietzsche denies that and says he would rather go back to a sort of Homeric outlook on things. Not that, but Nietzsche's not trying to say we should go back to worshiping the Greek pantheon. Okay, he just says it's we're past that point now. But it's kind of interesting how Promethean characters, there's all kinds of them out there. Very obvious examples like Milton's Satan, of course. That's probably ripped right from Aeschylus, character-wise and attitude-wise. But Prometheus is an interesting character, which I really enjoy. There's a really cool animation that I saw. If you look it up on YouTube, it's called Prometheus Bound. It's by some guy on YouTube. I wish I could remember the guy's name. He's got like 200 subscribers, but he made this animation. It's like a 12 or like 15-minute long animation with just incredible artwork and sound and everything. It's like it reminds me of like old, like the 90s Disney animations, just sick, like hand-drawn animation of Prometheus Bound. It's not one-to-one with the play, but it's really good. I recommend you check it out. I really liked watching that video, but it's pretty cool story. But it makes me wonder what Aeschylus is doing with this character. If we're supposed to empathize with him, because, yeah, he brings up all these sort of atheistic ideas through Prometheus, which we're indebted to Prometheus, which we kind of root for him because he's a kind of underdog. You can't help but root for Prometheus a little bit. But then he will say all this stuff, which is like totally just flipping off the gods, saying, F you, gods. And then the chorus kind of, you can see with the chorus, he kind of tries to like level it out. He's like, oh, but no. We're never going to sin against Zeus. We're not doing that. Because you have to think that he's still writing to a culture which worships these gods. So it's curious if Aeschylus was having some sort of atheistic ideas, which he writes in, expresses through Prometheus. He gets labeled as a madman in the end when he says, to sum it up in one word, I hate all gods. And they say, well, you're just crazy, because Hermes comes to ask Prometheus, like, hey, Zeus is asking what his fate is, because you said earlier that he's fated to fall eventually. What comes next after Zeus, by the way? And he says, I'm not telling. And since he's not going to tell, his extra punishment is to have an eagle come and eat his liver every day, so that he has to stew on his decision, which he's defiant. He says, I don't care. That's what I'm going to do. So the spirit of defiance is what Prometheus embodies. But yeah, it leads me to a lot of questions about Aeschylus, which are, it's kind of cool. Recommend you go read the play. Well worth your time. Apparently it's incomplete. There were multiple plays, Prometheus plays. However, the only one that remains is Prometheus Bound. because Aeschylus, you write trilogies within the what would they call it? The Greek theater, more or less. You would write these trilogies, which is where you get, the Agamemnon. It's where you get the Oresteia, the with Agamemnon, the libation bearers, and the Eumenides. That's a 3-part play, which gets told in a single day, but it's a complete story, but with 3 different parts. So Prometheus was part of that. However, we only have Prometheus Bound. So I'm sure that there were more questions which would have been wrapped up if we were able to access those remaining 2 plays. So it's unfortunate we don't have that. But there's all kinds of sort of modern retellings, I suppose, of Prometheus. And that Alien movie is one of them, which I watched, originally because I had just seen the guy drinking the black goo, which is like breaking down his DNA, and it falls into water, into generation, into the waterfall. And then through that animation, it's like his DNA breaks down into a base material and then formulates into new DNA. So he's seeding human evolution. That movie was disappointing to me because what they deleted from it would have been perfect if they would have kept it. It would have been so good. It would have been way more interesting than what it turned out to be, which is just an Alien prequel. Which is all it really needs to be. But I think that there were so many more interesting concepts that they could have gone with, because this whole idea is that these race of, aliens, are described on all these cave paintings all around the world, and they're pointing to this constellation. Well, now in 2090 something, these scientists found the constellation. They're going to go talk to the gods, basically, and find out what's going on. So they find them, and they actually end up awakening one of them, and he just kills everybody, and then that's the movie. But there were cut lines of dialogue where they say, they're these race that basically seed like intelligent life on planets, and they did that for here on Earth with humans, and then the humans got really out of hand, and they were about to pull a Genesis on them and wipe them out. But before they tried that, they took one of them, raised him up in their culture for 30-something years, brought him back, and then, raised this being with these Prometheans, and brought him back, and then they crucified him. So who does that sound like? Obviously. And when they find the ship, they find out that they're about to go to Earth and destroy the Earth, and it was set to arrive on Earth 2,000 years ago. So after they killed Christ, they were like, all right, we're done with these guys, start over. But they got interrupted by the xenomorph alien bioweapon that they were making, apparently. It's an interesting movie. You should go watch it. But they cut all that out. So it's just sort of ambiguous, which there's something to that. But I think if they would have hinted at it a little more, it could have been better. But, yeah. Interesting Christ connections, like this God that helps humanity is punished and crucified. Like Prometheus is basically, that's what happens to Prometheus, but the Christian version is obviously quite different, but similar line there. Oh, battery about to die. By the way, speaking of Jesus, I discovered Jesus in Ulysses. There's a Jesus Easter egg in Ulysses in chapter 5 when he goes to Hades, when Bloom goes to Patty Dingham's funeral. They're about to bury Patty Dingham, and the attendance is 12, but then there's this mysterious 13th guy. He's like, who's that that lanky guy wearing the Macintosh? Okay, so he's this mysterious 13th, which is like, the 12 disciples, and then the 13th is, Jesus. Well, anyways, they're writing down the attendants. Some, the funeral director or whatever writes down the names of the attendants, and he asks, who's that guy? And Bloom says, well, oh yeah, that guy, the Macintosh guy. And he mistakes, the guy writing down the names mistakes the Macintosh as the guy's name. Well, Macintosh, the etymology of Macintosh, if you look it up, I think it's Gaelic or something. It means son of a chief or son of a king. So I think that means that Joyce is trying to hint at Jesus there. So kind of an interesting little Easter egg. But yeah, anyways. I think I've rambled on enough. Hopefully you're having a good weekend. I'll see you later.